Hi, you are watching.
This story follows a man who gets transported into a game he was playing, reincarnating into a god named Nebula. However, he's not alone in this divine realm, as there were 27 other gods, and they have to fight to become the sole ruler of the planet and reshape it according to their vision. Part of their challenge is to find and influence a suitable tribe. And luckily for Nebula, a lizardman named Rakrak was insightful enough to realize what his intentions were. And so, after preparing what they necessarily needed, they followed their god's will and leave the sanctuary. However, their path was filled with dangers, as they have to defeat an abomination in order to continue traversing it. Luckily, with Jael's intelligence and the power of their god, they managed to kill it without them losing any of their men. And because of this, they even gain a tablet that contained language of ancient inhabitants. And with this, Rakrak had invented writing. And Rakrak got that dog in him, as he used this newfound skill to rizz up that shoddy that was always supporting him. Now on to the next part. A system notification popped up, notifying Nebula that Rakrak had indeed invented writing. And so Nebula cheered in joy on the inside, as there was no one to even watch him if he expressed it. However, it'll still take lots of generations to develop more. Nevertheless, it was still the beginning stage of the game. Now, Nebula just have to enjoy the show, because as Rakrak and Jael decided to be each other's companion, the clan celebrated this matter with a festival. On the surface, it might seem like a simple hunt, but capturing the largest prey to present to their spouse is how lizardmen celebrate their wedding ceremonies. And Rakrak once again proved his eligibility as a companion by offering the largest deer to his bride. But to their surprise, Jael had managed to catch a deer as well. But she made it look so easy compared to how Rakrak did it. Even Nebula couldn't hold a faint laugh to come out. It seems like Rakrak would have an interesting married life. After the wedding, Rakrak gave the land back to the orcs, which the orc couldn't believe what he just heard. And so he asked Rakrak if he was sure, confidently. Rakrak answered that he was, as the monster was an obstacle they had to defeat after all. And he also mentioned this was their land to begin with, so they can just live here again, just like they used to. With this, the Orc Lord couldn't help his tear to come out. He didn't expect someone to be this kind. And so with all his heart, he bowed to Rakrak and expressed how thankful he was. Now they owe him and his clan a great favor, and he would like to repay it. And since they are planning to go deeper on the mountains, he offered that his son lead the way for them, as they have lived here for a long time, so they know a path through the mountains that is wider and isn't as rugged. To which Rakrak gladly nodded at the generous gesture. But before they could leave, the Orc Lord thanked Rakrak once more, because before this, they used to live while being pestered by bigger beasts and larger tribes. But because of him, they might just be able to overcome it, and they will never forget this favor. This made Rakrak smile, and so he nodded in understanding. And just like that, Rakrak and his clan went on their way in a hurry. Everything seemed to be going smoothly. However, Nebula knew this game wasn't that easy. The reason why there were so many random encounters and negative events in the Lost World is probably because it is based on a real world, and he can already foresee what the next event will be. And just like what Nebula had expected, just within the next few days, Rakrak learned of another tribe not too far away that was also constantly scouting for danger around them. Rakrak didn't recognize the footprints, but the Starcatcher did. It's a frog footprint. Rakrak knew much when it came to the frogs. They were slippery, swam well, jumped up and down, and some even had poison. And he knew all this because they are able to eat the ones with poison now after God gave them his blessing. And many frogs lived in the ponds, and when the end of winter came, they would run out of food and had to come out of hibernation. The lizardmen would catch and eat them. The footprints looked similar to the ones left by those frogs the lizardmen had eaten, but were very different in size. And so Stargazer clarified that it came from the frogmen, a species that walks on two legs. They can also speak and think like them. This surprised Rakrak, as frogmen were a rare sight given their natural habitats were few and far between, such as rivers and lakes. Even for lizardmen with their wide range of activities, frogmen were hard to come by. And so Rakrak eagerly searched through the bushes and counted the footprints. To his surprise, there isn't just one, but quite a bit of them. With this number, it seemed like they are a larger tribe than them. And this footprint indicate that they must be scouting as well. This prompted Rakrak to ask Stargazer if these frogmen are belligerent, to which he responded that they might be, as they made their home here first. But that's not always the case. They're the same as any other bipedal species. Some are good, and some are bad. With this, Rakrak decided to return to their temporary base to discuss this with others. After the meeting was done, Rakrak told everyone to set up their camps as wide as many as possible. This idea that came from Jael had a purpose to deceive the frogmen into thinking their clan is large when seen from the outside. And there are lots of trees, so it's easy to make a fire. and they will have a bunch of guards keep an eye on the fires at night. And if they make more fires here and there, the frogmen will think their group is twice the actual size, despite the fires not being of use. It will also be good to keep watch at night, keeping in mind that the warriors will go on a reconnaissance. This was a sound idea. However, Rakrak pointed out that the work should be equally distributed amongst the lizardmen staying guard so that no one complains, which she understood. And with that, a few moments had passed by, and their plans had come into reality, and now they felt more confident to take rest even though the other tribe will be watching them. And true to their expectations, just beyond the mountains, several frog silhouettes could be seen, and a few days had passed. They switched bases. Fortunately, they did not encounter any frogmen, and during that time, they had prepared a lot of things to ensure the tribe's safety. At this point, Nebula even doubted there are many players who are more successful than him, as cattle breeding went smoothly, and their housing lifestyles were quickly evolving to adapt to the changed environment. The most fascinating thing was how quickly they established the concept of writing, and that is all thanks to Rakrak, who was actively using the written language he had recently discovered. When the warriors came back from reconnaissance, he would always listen to what they saw at the big wide rock in the middle of the village, and he will always mark the shape of the river onto the large rock. On the rock, the village was marked at the center, and distances were marked based on a particular scale to show the topography of the area. To be exact, it was a map that was developed from hunting marks, but the idea of making a permanent record like written language was applied. This record was actually useful, helping the warriors that were split into groups to figure out the surrounding terrains while Rakrak was away. And this served as an opportunity for the clan to become interested in the utility of writing and records, which were made possible because their now more stable lifestyles allowed them more spare time. Rather than having them overwork themselves, Rakrak recommended keeping written record as they went about their various activities. As an example, he told them they could each write down how many pieces of fruit they had collected every day, so that it was possible to know exactly who worked less and who worked more. And once the lizardmen started recording things, the ones who were more diligent reduced the amount they collected by a reasonable margin, rather than criticizing their fellow lizardmen, while those who fell short collected more. This proved to be effective in improving everyone's productivity. It was just as Rakrak had expected. However, he gained more insights than he had expected. He realized that when they relied on their memories, they would live by compromising. It caused emotional stress since some were more diligent, while others got lazy, and no one was able to say anything because there was no clear evidence. Now, though, everyone is being careful as they know records are permanent. And although Rakrak's idea hadn't been recognized by the game system, Nebula noticed what Rakrak's idea stemmed from. A simple discovery was meaningless. Once the culture of writing and recording began, they could do a greater variety of things than before, and realizing the importance of this idea was the first step. With this, Nebula was delighted, as they're doing better than he thought they would. And Nebula hadn't been able to pay much attention to Rakrak's clan recently. Even though Rakrak's clan was Nebula's only tribe, he had many other things to do, just like in the game of the Lost World, as gods had many more responsibilities outside of managing their tribes. Nebula currently had 3 large swarms of insects. These swarms weren't simply controlled by Nebula. Each group had grown into their own entity. One of these swarms was the swarm of locusts in the west that indirectly benefited Rakrak and his clan. These locusts focused on disrupting and eliminating factors that could pose a threat, or create unnecessary variables to Rakrak's clan. And the second swarm of insects, which Rakrak and his clan weren't even aware of, were in the far south of the forest. In the game, there was a trick called Small Area XP Farming, and the south of the forest was dedicated for this. At this place, Nebula was creating and cultivating all kinds of insects to transform the area into a nest full of insects. Because of this, Nebula was able to level up his small area from 3 to 4, which in turn gave him a new skill. But this is a method he wouldn't have dreamt of doing if there were other players nearby, because they definitely wouldn't just watch and do nothing at the sight of this kind of farming. But because Nebula's starting location was on the outer part of the peninsula, it seemed that other players hadn't discovered it yet, and he definitely has to take advantage of the fact that he started in an area with only a few other players. But if other players were around, there would be many technical benefits from a clash of civilizations, just like when Rakrak's clan and the Blue Skin tribe met. So rather than Nebula being ahead of the other players, it could be said that he was trying to make up for potential losses, at least for now. And the fact that Rakrak's capability and the status of the tribe are currently above average, so he was more confident to get ahead of others. But this is just the beginning, because what will happen next will be even more dangerous than anything ever experienced. So then, Nebula observed the first encounter between the two tribes, as one of Rakrak's warriors went up to him and notified him that the frogmen were coming towards them. In response, Rakrak reminded the warrior of the importance of providing detailed information in such reports. Specifically, the number of enemies, their armament, and the speed of their approach. The warrior quickly apologized for the oversight and then provided the necessary details. There were 7 in the group. All of them were armed, and they are slowly making their way towards them. And there is one more thing that even Rakrak was briefly surprised by what the warrior said. But he decided not to think too deeply about it before he saw and judged things for himself. And being armed but approaching on foot means there's a chance for conversation. Their numbers are also small. With this, Rakrak decided to lead 10 armed warriors to meet the frogmen before they reached the village. He took 10 because they needed more numbers for safety. But they also shouldn't look intimidating just to have a conversation. And as the 2 tribes met at a small clearing in the forest, the warriors had been observing and delivering information about the frogmen until now, so their first sight of the frogmen wasn't completely unfamiliar. Their skin was slippery, and they were somewhat smaller than lizardmen. They were characterized by their large eyes and transparent eyelids, and their short necks and bodies that looked hard and firm seemed common for frogmen. And Rakrak confirmed that the special note relayed by the warrior was true. There were 6 frogmen, and next to them was a lizardman with grayish-brown scales, which made him think the possibility that this was an effort to make peace. And seeing the tension between the group, the leader of the frogmen broke the ice by introducing himself first. He called himself Shunan, son of the great tribe leader Oloi, and they have no intention of fighting them. Seeing that these frogmen were courteous in their own way, Rakrak also introduced himself, and he also emphasized that they have no intention of raising their weapons. And as the 2 leaders spoke to each other, both tribes that were standing guard returned to a resting position. Still, Rakrak couldn't help but think it would have been better if the tribal leader had come himself. But Rakrak didn't expect that much, so he gets straight to the point and asked them the reason they were here, to which Shunan explained that they have come to let them know that his tribe has invaded their territory. It was just as Rakrak had expected. There was no need to accept Shunan's words as an attack. After all, only by stating that their opponent was in the wrong could one press for an advantage. Still, Rakrak knew how to deflect this, so he stated that he wouldn't say the whole land is their territory, as there was no sign suggesting that this land had an owner already, and therefore they didn't know. But he apologized for not noticing they were here first. And Shunan didn't say anything for a moment after Rakrak made a clear apology, as he recognized that Rakrak had gotten one over on him. And seeing their reactions, Rakrak continued to clarify things up. He stated that their circumstance is a bit different, as they have come from a place very far away. He is not sure if they will settle down long term, but they need to stay here for now as they have no other place to go. This made Shunan stutter as he doesn't know how to respond, but Rakrak did, and so he used his glib tongue to state that is his first time seeing frogmen. But Shunan, son of the great tribal leader Auloi, seemed like a warrior capable of making decisions, and is the only one who has the authority to show them mercy and grant their request. And Shunan couldn't come up with anything contrarian, so he ended up agreeing with Rakrak. He was even proud to boast that this is possible with his authority as the next leader of the tribe. And as Shunan was dancing on the top of Rakrak's palm, he noticed the big warrior standing beside Shunan glancing at him. It was a look of dissatisfaction. With this, he figured out that the tribal chief probably assigned that warrior to his son because he doesn't trust him, while keeping a closer watch on them, but he still has a lot of questions in mind, and therefore he decided to be extra careful in collecting information. With this in mind, Rakrak suggested that instead of talking here, Shunan should come to their village to be welcomed since both tribes have come to an agreement without much conflict. And when Shunan was about to go along with what Rakrak had suggested, the big warrior whispered something into Shunan's ear. Shunan's attitude suddenly changed. So instead of going with Rakrak's idea, he just stated that they don't have a lot to thank each other for, and he doesn't think they have that much mutual trust built yet. Still, Rakrak couldn't let them leave just yet, so he stated that them lizardmen can't just send Shunan off after being indebted to him for what he has done for them. So he suggests to have a meal at this spot instead, and before Shunan could respond, he turned to the big warrior, and the warrior nodded. With this, Rakrak and Shunan is now sitting across each other while they are waiting for the deer to be cooked. But now that Rakrak was able to let them stay a little longer, his mind was preoccupied on how to find out more about the relationship between that single lizard with these frogmen, and what their intentions were in coming together. But he can't let them know that he is curious, because if they realize he want to know more, they'll use it to their advantage. With this in mind, Rakrak started a casual conversation with Shunan. He stated that he may accept that the land around here is the frogmen territory, but he wants to know on what grounds they are saying this. This prompted Shunan to point out the decorative feathers hanging around his neck, and stated with pride that these are the feathers of the cockatrice that lives in a forest nearby. But as expected, Rakrak doesn't have a clue on what that is, So Shunin explained that they are dangerous animals who live around this forest. Huge birds that walk on their 2 feet. They are not just large in size but poisonous as well, and it is very difficult for them to catch, and they never manage to kill it in their many encounters, but only barely chasing it away. Because aside from their speed, they also have a wide range of movement. They are the reason why they keep watch around the area. And because of Shunin's descriptions, Rakrak was curious on how they managed to deal with the cockatrice, so he asked Shunin if they use a javelin as a weapon, but this just made Shunin smirk, knowing the fact that they are far above these lizard men, as the only long-ranged weapon they could think of is a javelin. And Rakrak also noticed Shunin's subtle smugness. Still, it didn't bother him, as he was more curious on what these frogmen could offer, and so he let Shunin be the smuglord that he was. And as expected, Shunin excitedly want to show off their weapon, the bow and arrow, and Rakrak took interest in the weapon he hadn't heard of, and the lizardmen hadn't seen a bow before since they grew up in places where there weren't many species of trees and thus were short on wood supplies, and so he looked at Shunin intently. Surprisingly, Shunin called out the lizard with them, who was named Owen, asking him a favor if Owen could bring him his bow and arrow, which Owen gladly responded that he will. And seeing that Shunin was considerate of the lizard, it left a positive impression on Rakrak. And after Owen handed the bow to him, Shunin asks Owen once again to set up an appropriately sized wooden board on the tree nearby, so that he could practice his archery, which Owen gladly did. But with just this, Rakrak's impression of them immediately changed, as he noticed a strange power relation between Shunin and the lizardman Owen. Shunin acts like he's asking a favor, but it seems to him that Owen is an errand boy. However, anyone compared to the son of the tribal chief would seem like an errand boy, so he didn't say anything, and just observed Owen do his work and watched Shunin's archery practice. The arrow Shunin shot flew with a whoosh and struck the middle of the target. This impressed Rakrak, and as Rakrak admired Shunin's skills, he was also picturing in his head how to respond if they were to fight the frogmen. But as he was thinking this, Shunin then boasted about how they learn archery from when they were young, and he is one of the best archers in their tribe, which Rakrak responded in kind, but he was more curious on how to handle the bow. So he asked Shunin if he could also use this weapon called bow, to which Shunin gladly handed the bow to him, but he emphasized to Rakrak that it will be hard since it's his first time after all. But Rakrak didn't hear a single thing that Shunin had said, as he was more enticed with the weapon that he was holding, and as he inspected the weapon, he noticed the branch and string are definitely sturdy. Its power is weak compared to a javelin, but he can carry few arrows around. It's also a lot more precise than a javelin and has a faster attack speed. It's a weapon they absolutely need, and therefore he would like to look into this roughly to his heart's content. But as Shunin stated, his skills with the bow were trash. Strength wasn't an issue. It was a skill issue, because a beginner is still a beginner even if they are strong. So Rakrak couldn't hit shit, just like how a stormtrooper start their daily training. And he missed his shot like the plank of wood had a plot armor. Still, Shunin was kind enough to say inspiring words and avoid saying anything rude. But as Rakrak was still inspecting the bow, Shunin asks Owen, what is he doing, not collecting the arrows? And so Owen ran immediately to collect it, while Shunin was somewhat irritated of the fact that he still has to remind of Owen of this. But this was a great opportunity for Rakrak, and so he explained to Shunin that he shot those arrows, and therefore he should have been the one to go pick them, which Shunin was caught off guard by this, since Rakrak was a leader after all. But this might be just the way of the lizardmen, so he let Rakrak do what he pleases. And as Rakrak picked up an arrow from the ground, Shunin shrugged and shifted his gaze to where the meal was being prepared. With this, Rakrak picked up another arrow and approached Owen. But Owen panicked like he didn't know how he should behave in front of Rakrak, which he thinks that it was a strange reaction. But still, Rakrak went through with his plan and tried to interrogate Owen, asking why is a lizardman like him with the frogmen, which Owen stuttered a while before finzing his voice to explain it was because lizardmen and frogmen are living together. Rakrak was thrown off as he never imagined such a thing would be possible. If different species lived together, their differing lifestyles would inevitably lead to conflicts. Rakrak didn't think of frogmen this way, but some other species would be disgusted by the physiological aspect of frogmen. Even if a friendly relationship was maintained, it was normal for communities to divide. And so Rakrak asks Owen to explain further, to which Owen did, and it was because both species are of help to each other. This was a surprise to Rakrak, and so out of pure curiosity, he asked Owen to be specific about it, and Owen replied as if he had rehearsed what to say, stating that, in exchange for receiving protection from frogmen, them lizards can help out by doing tasks that are inconvenient for the frogmen, as frogmen can't live outside of water for too long. Lizardmen are also better than frogmen at climbing trees or picking fruits, and lizardmen in return can eat the fish in the water. What Owen had said sounded like they were helping each other, But something was strange to Rakrak, and there was no doubt sharing food is good. But Rakrak pointed out to Owen that lizardmen doesn't need protection, because lizardmen have the ability to defend themselves. This made Owen shook his head, but he seemed surprised, as he panically tried to convince Rakrak that this forest is dangerous, and Owloy's frogmen are a big tribe. It will be hard for them lizardmen to survive without the frogmen. And Rakrak wanted to ask more, but he was starting to feel the weight of Shunen's gaze, and he doesn't like what he heard. So he told Owen to forget the conversation they just had, and just pretend that he only asked about how to be good at archery. Afterwards, the two groups ate while having small talk, but as soon as Shunen got to eat the meat, he was gladly surprised of the flavor that was in it. Just by adding fragrant herbs, it made the meat even more delicious. And seeing that Shunen knows how to enjoy a large, juicy meat, Rakrak asked Shunen if he had ever tried a water buffalo, which made Shunen more excited than before, as he had eaten one, but it's been a while since he had caught one, but even still he could remember how delicious it tastes. And since Shunen was visibly interested in the buffaloes they had, he asked if Shunen is willing. They could trade for a pouch of arrows, to which Shunen was about to agree. However, he instantly changed his mind as soon as he noticed the facial expression of one of his guards glaring at him intently. So it seems like there was no chance they would trade even a single bow. But Rakrak just reacted stoically as to not garner some suspicions from Shunen's guards. Still, Shunen just broke the tension again, clarifying that they will delve into those discussions when their friendly relations deepen, and likely it would not be too far off. As they could see, the members of their own tribe do not bear hostility with lizardmen. They're being friendly to not just Owen who came here with them, but the rest of the lizard warriors. And that's all because the two races live together in their village. To further prove this, Shunen called out Owen and asks him to explain to Rakrak how they have spent the past few months helping each other out, which Owen was glad to be of service, as long as it will promote friendship between them. But Rakrak just looked at Owen with suspicious eyes, because as expected, they brought it up so easily as if they had prepared for this beforehand. And if Rakrak hadn't interrogated Owen first, he would have believed every word that came out of Shunen's mouth. And like Owen, Shunen also seemed to have a speech prepared, which raised Rakrak's suspicion even more. And after that facade was over, Rakrak offered for the two tribes to meet again. Such events were mainly for tribes to exchange or share food to make them closer. Shunen gladly accepted the offer, prompting Rakrak to suggest to meet them somewhere a bit closer to their tribe next time, instead of having them come from afar, which Shunen was about to accept. But just like before, standing next to Shunen was Oboy the guard, and once again he interrupted before he could accept Rakrak's offer. So, Shunen immediately changed his decision, and now he stated that this place is fine, and there is nothing that blocks their vision, and it's a good place for both tribes to keep an eye on each other, which Rakrak just accepted it to avoid further tension between the two tribes. And with that, the two tribes decided when to meet and went their separate ways, and Rakrak saw Owen glancing back at him a few times through the group of frogmen returning home. This was enough of a confirmation that there is definitely something going on. Even Jowl saw through their lies, as they were too obvious. The way they act doesn't look like the relationship of people on an equal footing.
Hit that like button and thanks for watching.